Good morning. My name is Hera McLeod. I wish I could say that I had a prepared speech for you today, but unfortunately I'm a victim of the government shutdown and I've been furloughed, so I've been a little distracted as of late. I wish I could stand here today and say that I had a happy story for everyone of a case that had been turned around, but unfortunately in my situation and my son's situation, my case didn't last long enough for it to have been turned around. Some of you in this room are aware of what happened to my son, Prince McLeod. I'm going to leave the second last name off for obvious reasons. About a year ago, on October 20th, my son was drowned by his father on his fourth unsupervised visit. I fought for 15 months before that to try to limit the access to supervised visits or no visits, but unfortunately, I lost that battle. I'm not standing here today for myself. I'm standing here on behalf of my son because he can't be here himself. We're facing a crisis here in American history. There were members of my family hundreds of years ago that didn't have civil rights in this country, and they weren't considered people. We call them slaves. At a time in our U.S. history, women also didn't have rights and weren't viewed as equal people. Today, I think a lot of times we take for granted the basic civil rights that we have as adults. And what I have learned through this system and through what has happened to me and my family is that children don't have civil rights in this country. Some of you may have read in the Washington Post this weekend, there was an editorial, and one of the most powerful parts of that editorial, to me, said that the courts believe that parents have a constitutional right to raise their children. I had full custody of my son, physical and legal custody of my son. It didn't matter. I wasn't given civil rights to raise my son because part of raising a child is being able to protect them. And I was not allowed to protect my son. But at the end of the day, I would have put my civil rights on the table if it meant that my son could have some. Because after all of this, the courts gave me some civil rights, at least I had custody, but the courts did nothing for my son. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I don't stand here as a turnaround case. My son was also a victim of a mental health professional who came into court, and despite the history that this man had been living off of the Social Security death benefits and the life insurance from two people who had been brutally murdered before, this professional stood up in front of the court and talked about how he should have access to his son and how he was safe to be around him. This mental health professional was also a school psychologist whose background was in child autism. And so as I sit here today, I think to myself, well, my son's father didn't have autism, and he wasn't a child. I don't know why. I don't know why she was put in that position to make that determination. 2 weeks before my son died, I found myself in my attorney's office, crying, screaming, probably looking like a basket case because I was. And I asked them, please file an emergency order to keep him in Maryland. At the time, my son was peacefully sleeping in his stroller. He had no idea what was going on. And my attorneys laughed at me and they said, if you don't stop fighting, you're going to lose custody. You need to learn to appreciate what this man can offer your child. And I said, well, please educate me because I'm not exactly sure what that is at this moment. And they told me that he was a mastermind at manipulation, and that was a good skill to have. 2 weeks later, I was in the hospital. This is before I knew that my son had been murdered. And I called my attorney and I said, it's happened again. What do I do? And this was a Saturday, and he said, well, calm down, don't worry, on Monday we'll file an emergency order. I called back 2 hours after I had been told that my son was brain dead, and I said, don't worry about that emergency order, he's dead. Monday morning was when my son had an autopsy. On January 25th, his father was arrested when authorities got the information from the medical examiner that he had been drowned. About a week after they were right around the same time, they released the information that he had taken out more than $580,000 in life insurance on my son when he was only 3 months old. So for 15 months, I spent my entire time with my son fighting to save him. My son's father spent that 15 months trying to get access to him so he could drown him and get money from it. So I stand here today and I plead with you to think about the real issue here. It's not about the rights of a father. It's not about the rights of a mother. It's about the right of a child.